My name is Michael Ellick, and I am assistant pastor at Judson Memorial Church in New York City, Greenwich Village. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, though. Well, we're doing a lot at Judson, but probably the most work and the most direct in this sense is something called the New Sanctuary Movement. And this is directly related to human rights, and in my mind is one of the most crucial in the city in the United States. As you may or may not know, we have what we feel to be a really broken immigration system in the U.S. And regardless of where you fall politically on how we should be handling our borders and how we should be handling the immigration procedures, one of the things that a lot of people of faith were seeing over the past 10, 15 years, especially in the last 5 since 9/11, was that the way immigrants were being treated in our country went through a radical shift. And that now people who, we're all immigrants here, everyone here is an immigrant, just a matter of when you came in. Now all of a sudden people were being criminalized and mistreated. And at first I didn't know too much about this issue. But as we as a congregation and myself started to scratch the surface of it, we found this to be something so pervasive, and the stories that would come in were so terrible about people living in our country, upholding our economy, who basically have no human rights at all, have no hospitals they can go to, no legal recourse they can go to, mistreated economically, and certainly with what we feel to be hate speech all over our media and our government. So Judson and the New Sanctuary Movement here in New York, we're just one small part of a wider movement, both here in the city and nationwide, wanted to find ways of leveraging whatever church power we had to stop what we saw as basically a human rights abuse for 12 million people living in our country. And in my mind, again, it's the fundamental human rights abuse going on in the United States. But it's subtle, the way it works. It doesn't get reported in media. So basically, we try to partner organizations like churches, synagogues, mosques, with individual people or families, and help take care of their needs in the same way we would for anyone else in our congregation. It's basically just pastoral care, looking out for them emotionally, maybe financially, certainly spiritually, but then also starting to write letters of support for them with their legal case, starting to leverage whatever political influence we might have, anything we can do to protect them, all the way up to, perhaps in cases, providing physical sanctuary to shield them from the government. This is certainly an extreme example of what we would do. We're not doing it here at Judson, but there's churches around the country that have people who are out of resources and so are offering amnesty to people, shielding them from the U.S. government, and what we feel to be an inhumane system all around. That's the overview, big part of it, but this is part of the largest thing we're doing human rights-wise right now, and it dominates everything we do from the beginning of the day to the end of the night, basically. Well, I should say there's a great story about the New Sanctuary Movement. One of the things we try to do is, while we're advocating for specific people who come to us and ask for sanctuary and advocacy in one way or another, we also try to share their stories so that the debate can change by people hearing about what's happening to these individuals. And so a great one is my good friend Gene. And Gene is a gentleman from Haiti who came here as a young man with his father, before he was 18. This is now like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. My dates aren't fresh, though. And Gene came here, and like so many else, didn't have a lot of money. And his dad eventually passed. And as a young immigrant, and again, he was a legal immigrant, but some of his siblings are citizens. He was what they call a permanent resident. He had a green card. Everything was fine for him. He was no immigration issue at all, here entirely legally. Well, as a young man living in Brooklyn, he was driving a cab, and back then, at the time, a lot of the drug trade was going on through the cabs. And so, at 19 years old, he made a mistake, and he got involved with selling to make money for his family. Well, he got caught. Well, Gene served his time faithfully, and was a model prisoner, and was kind of noted for being so on all his reviews. And he came out, and he was an American success story to follow. He got married when he is out. Again, he'd served his time, paid all this stuff for the crime, and now this is much later. He started a business. He had children. Gene was a very successful and is a very successful entrepreneur, and made a lot of money, employed a lot of people, a real pillar of his community, and takes care of his 12 brothers and sisters who are different ages, many of whom are American citizens. Well, in the late 90s, an immigration law was passed that basically said anyone, anywhere, who has ever been convicted of a felony and who is an immigrant on any level, who is not a citizen, is to be deported immediately. The tricky part about that law is that it was applied retroactively. So this included anyone who had ever been tried for a felony, even those long before the law had passed. Well, Gene had been convicted, and so eventually they caught up to him and served him papers. It's time for you to go. You've got to get out. And this was shocking to him. He's permanent resident, green card. It seemed unconstitutional. He is now being charged essentially twice for the same crime. This is a double jeopardy clause in some way. So he immediately went and tried to defend himself. This would leave his business with no leader, his family with no father. These are American citizen kids, and there's just no one to review this case for. Well, whatever he did, he wasn't getting a fair shake, and so Gene became a real strong advocate for himself and for others in the same boat, for a group called Families for Freedom. And eventually he was tied to us and became a member of our community, and we began to advocate for him as well. And this is an example of how ridiculous and unfair these laws are being applied. So Gene is an example of someone who is being completely punished and given this punitive torture. Now, while his case is still pending, they put an ankle bracelet out on him. He's tagged. He has to check in 3 times a week. He has to, it makes him not able to work, really, because it's during work hours that are convenient for them. He has curfews, as if he's some criminal. This is a guy who everyone knows is a pillar in the community. I mean, I wish you were in the room so I could introduce you to him. He has to check in on a piece of paper where he is every second of every day. And if they find out that he's not there, then he's really punished in some way. He can't leave his house after 8 o'clock at night, and at 8 o'clock in the morning he has to be there for 12 hours. This is an amazing crush on him as far as work, much less personal life with his family. It's so mean and so punitive, and part of this larger way in which our nature of immigration debate has shifted from being one of immigration and naturalization services, where we used to have a bunch of social workers helping these people, to being immigration and customs enforcement, where now we have a bunch of cops treating these people like criminals in our country, treating immigrants as criminals in a nation filled with immigrants. This is preposterous, and Gene is this model example of a real abuse. And there are literally millions more in our country who aren't in a position where they can step forward and share their story in a way that Gene has been able to. I mean, when our governments fail to uphold the social contracts by which they are governed, then it is up to us as people of faith to do this. I mean, why do we practice religion other than to be oriented to the fundamental nature of reality in some way? This isn't, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a Christian because this is my club or my team. This is the way in which I am trying to understand and interpret the fundamental realities of existence. And this trumps my government. This trumps my personhood in so many ways. This is something so much more fundamental. And my religion tells me, and again, I feel within my heart from my faith, that we are called to a life of compassion and service and care to each other. And I mean, churches that aren't practicing this, I wonder, is this the gospel not to do it? We can talk and talk and talk all day about policy and about theology, but if we're not walking in the footsteps of Jesus, and again, the New Sanctuary movement that I work with, I don't want to make this an exclusively a Christian thing, but all of the religions that I'm working with hold up this kind of compassion as a central tenet. And are we really a people of faith if we're not walking the walk of faith? the pursuit of human rights should be fundamental to all people. And if our governments aren't doing it, then we as individuals and as communities need to ignore them and do it ourselves. And this is what we're going to do until the politicians catch up to us. And they will. They will catch up to us. I have faith in this.